If you were to travel at the speed of light, where could you go in 24 hours? You'd be able to travel 186,000 miles or 300,000 kilometers. That's the distance from Earth to the moon and back 3 times. But that's slow poke stuff. Let's crank it up. Let's go 10 times faster than light. The laws of physics would break down, time would stop for you, and space would contract until everything was completely flat. You'd literally be able to see the entire universe in one instant. In this video, we're going to take your suggestions and travel at an insane percentage of the speed of light. Along the way, we'll learn about how the universe works and just how fast light actually goes. We know that if you traveled at the speed of light, you wouldn't be able to travel backwards in time. That would violate causality, and the whole universe would implode into a big crunch. It'd also require more energy than the universe has available. And even if you could get a head start on the universe and make it all happen before the Big Bang, the time dilation effect would mean that time would pass normally for you while time stopped for everything else. So you'd be stuck waiting for the universe to catch up with you forever. But what if you went just over the speed of light? Say 1% faster. Well, math tells us that there are some weird things that would happen. First of all, according to Einstein's theory of special relativity, time would stop for you. If you had a clock, it would stop ticking. Your heart would stop beating and your breathing would stop. You'd become frozen in time. At 1% of the speed of light, your mass would increase by 1%. Which means that traveling at 1% of the speed of light is basically impossible. Not only would you need a spaceship that's 1% as massive as the universe, but it would also take 1% of the universe's total energy to accelerate you to that speed. What if you were willing to put in the work and get to 10% of the speed of light? You'd have some company. That's because every particle in the universe is traveling at roughly 10% of the speed of light. That's how particles move around at room temperature. The hotter something is, the faster its particles move. As you increased your speed towards 10% of the speed of light, you'd notice the air around you getting thinner. That's because you'd be literally outrunning the molecules that make up our atmosphere. Even though you'd be traveling slower than the fastest man-made object ever created, the Parker Solar Probe, which reached 430,000 miles per hour in 2021, it'd be like being in outer space. And the faster you went, the thinner the air would get. At 10% of the speed of light, you'd encounter interstellar space pretty quickly. In fact, you'd be able to reach Alpha Centauri, the next star over, in about 4.4 years. That's about 4 light years away. The thing is, those 4 light years wouldn't seem like much to you. According to the twin paradox, which is a consequence of special relativity, time would be passing for your twin back on Earth at a rate that's 10 times faster than yours. That's because time passes slower the faster you travel. So when you reached Alpha Centauri after 4.4 years, your twin would be 44 years older. If you continued accelerating, you'd be able to travel to Proxima Centauri, the closest star to our own, in less than 4 years. In fact, you'd be able to travel 10 light years in just under 10 years. And every 10% you accelerated further, you'd be able to travel 10 times further in the same amount of time. That brings us to the question, how far could you travel in 24 hours if you were traveling at 100% of the speed of light? Well, if you were traveling at the speed of light, you wouldn't be able to travel at all. That's because nothing can travel faster than light, not even 99% of light. However, let's imagine that you were able to travel at 100 C. If you were to do so, you'd be able to travel 186,000 miles in 24 hours. That's about 7.6 trillion miles per year. Let's go faster. How about 200 C? At this speed, you'd be traveling 15.5 trillion miles per year. But remember, space is curved. So when you get to 200 C, you're going to start traveling through the universe sideways. Well, technically, you're not going to be doing any traveling at all. That's because the universe is fundamentally incapable of allowing anything to travel faster than light. Space and time itself resist anything trying to travel faster than light. You'd be able to go a bit further if you traveled at 250 C. That's because the fabric of space-time would start to thin out and allow you to punch a hole through it. You'd be traveling about 20 trillion miles per year. At 300 C, the space-time fabric would become paper thin, and you'd be able to travel 25 trillion miles per year. When you punch through the other side of the universe, you'd pop out 13.5 billion light-years away from where you started. You'd only be able to go a little further if you hit 350 C. That's because the fabric of space-time would become so thin that it would rip apart. You'd be traveling 30 trillion miles per year. At 400 C, the fabric of space-time would become so thin that you'd be able to completely traverse the universe in a single year. You'd be traveling 35 trillion miles per year. When you pass through the other side of the universe, you'd be at the beginning again. You'd be able to go a little further if you hit 450 C. That's because the fabric of space-time would become so thin that it would no longer exist. You'd be traveling 40 trillion miles per year. At 500 C, you'd be traveling 50 trillion miles per year. The space-time fabric would cease to exist entirely. You'd be traveling through a void with no space or time. You'd be traveling infinitely fast. So how far could you go in 24 hours if you were traveling at 500 C? Well, since you'd be traveling infinitely fast, you'd be able to travel an infinite amount of distance. You'd be able to travel to every place in the universe and every place outside the universe. But then again, that's kind of boring. Let's turn it up to 11. How about 1100 C? At this speed, you'd be traveling faster than the speed of light. Space and time would no longer have any meaning. Everything would be completely flat and the laws of physics would break down. You'd be able to travel between galaxies in an instant, and the entire universe would be visible from any point. It would be a little like looking at a flat plane that stretches out in all directions, except there'd be no up or down. There'd be no left or right. There'd be no past or future. There'd be no time. There'd be no space. There'd be no anything. Traveling at 1100 C would essentially be like traveling to the beginning of the universe. All of space and time would be collapsed together, and you'd be able to see everything that ever happened and everything that ever will happen. There'd be no reason to go anywhere else. You'd have nowhere else to go. You'd be at the edge of reality, so that's how far you'd be able to travel in 24 hours if you were traveling at 1100 C. An infinite amount of distance. But if you could somehow travel faster than 1100 C, you wouldn't be able to go anywhere because you'd have already been everywhere. Except that's not possible. Nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. It's a law of physics. But what if it wasn't? What if there was a way to break the cosmic speed limit? Would you break the cosmic speed limit? Vote in the poll and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and check out the links in the description for more videos about the amazing discoveries made by scientists and the incredible mysteries of our universe. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching.